You guys, we're going to talk about why mathematics and science in general point to a theistic conclusion in God. Like, we're going to watch a lecture by Professor John Lennox. A lot of people have heard about it in the Richard Dawkins versus Lennox debate. Like, let's just take a look at it.
To and remember in my old age to say so, that science has faith at its heart. So it's not science here and faith over there. And I'm going to be talking about not faith in the sense of religion, but faith in God and science. Now, why that's important to me? There are several reasons, but firstly, because I was curious, Christian background, but wanted to discover just where my mathematics fitted inside science, and then where my science fitted inside the big picture.
Let me stop you for a moment. That's a remarkable statement. Most people have very little fascination with math. It's difficult. So the idea that you were fascinated by math and wanted to pursue math is something. But what was it that made you want to fit math into science? I mean, because I would guess that most mathematicians don't leap into the world of science. You've leapt rather fully into that world, and you've not left your math behind. But what was it that pushed you to be inquisitive about science from the position of a mathematician?
Well, I think it involves Christianity in a very profound way, because I hadn't been studying mathematics long. Now, I'm talking about being a teenager now, long before I got to Cambridge. I'm a teenager and I'm reading, and I discover statements like Kepler's statements that God has revealed to us the secrets of the universe, something like that, in the language of mathematics. And I discovered pretty early on, through my reading, actually of C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis was a literary genius, but he understood, in a way that some scientists don't, the big issues that arose. And he made a statement in one of his books, and it really stuck with me, and I've used it all my life, and I'm going to use it now. He looks back at the origin of...
Every modern major scientist, like Galileo, Kepler, everyone who contributed to uh, to the mathematics in general, they all believed in God in general. Like, it's irrefutable.
modern science. It arose in the 16th and 17th centuries with people like Galileo, Kepler, and Newton. Let's just stick with those three. And he makes the point that people have observed, and many books have been written about him, that they were all believers in God. And the
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. These people all believed in God. Like, I hate when the atheistic position that claims like mathematics is so disapprove like God itself. Well, the pioneers of mathematics in general, like they believed in God too. Like,
question comes up, is there a connection between belief in God and doing science? And the answer is, and it still is today, given by most people with nuances, that there's a very profound connection. Lewis put it, as usual, brilliantly. He said men became scientific. Why? Because they expected law in nature. And they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. And when I discovered that, I thought, this is wonderful, because
yeah, without a theistic God, you cannot derive first principles whatsoever. Like the atheistic models assume first principles. They always presuppose first principles and eternal truths, and they have no justification for the self-evident truths itself. Like only a theistic God can give a grounding for justification for eternal truths or self-evident truths itself, not in just terms of morality, like in terms of epistemology and everything.
it's telling me that far from their belief in God hindering their science, it was their belief in God that drove their science. It was the motive that drove it, which is why I find your question, which is right at the heart of our, particularly our Western culture today, it's ironic that today people are saying science and God are incompatible, when the very people they depended on, the real geniuses of science, all believed in God. And so they didn't see any inconsistency. Now, I learned that pretty young. And what it narrows down to is the very interesting fact that mathematics works.
That idea that math makes sense somehow, that the world is under that the world of science is related to mathematical equations. Most lay people would never think about that. And even when I have read about this concept in a newspaper article that some mathematician or some scientist is marveling at the idea that the laws of nature can be understood and that they can be described by math, they seem to make it sound stunning, that it's startling. But to lay people, it's almost as though we don't understand why it's stunning. In other words, maybe we associate math and science in such a way that we think, well, of course it's got to be that way.
That's right, that's right. But it took a really great mind to see it was stunning. Einstein. Albert Einstein said the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And he was clever enough to see there was an issue. Eugen Wigner, who also with Einstein won a Nobel Prize for Physics, he wrote a paper which is much loved by mathematicians in 1961, and he called it The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics.
The unreasonable
Yes, now
effectiveness.
that's very interesting.
Yes.
In other words, you shouldn't expect mathematics to work. Now, Richard Feynman, the great American Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said the same thing. It's just stuff.
Yeah, for mathematics to work, you need like God in general. Like without it, you need first principles and self-evident truths and laws of logic. And without a theistic God, you cannot give a grounding for the laws of logic or justification for them.
That it actually works. Here is somebody, and she's a mathematician, and she's thinking in here about the universe out there, and she comes up with equations, and they describe what's out there. I mean, how does that possibly work in such a way that it gives us power over these things? Newton, law of gravity and his laws of motion alone, without even Einstein's corrections, can help us send a person to the moon. How does that actually work? Now, what interested me, and this is a bit later on at
I wouldn't go that far. I don't believe in the moon landing and shit.
university. I read Wigner's paper. I've read it several times.
So Wigner wrote the paper as late as 61, you said?
Yes, the unreasonable effectiveness. And I said, what do you mean unreasonable? What is the worldview that's driving that verdict? And that opened a whole world to me that wasn't apparent in terms of its significance until the last 10 years or so, when I saw how powerful it is. Because one of the things now that I say to people is my main reason for not being an atheist as a scientist is not that I'm a Christian, it's because I can do science. Because the only thing that makes reasonable the effectiveness of mathematics is my faith in God.
That's a very radical statement.
It's a very radical
And
statement.
one almost never hears that statement, even from people speaking on the very subject on which we're speaking. That you're saying that not only are science and God compatible, you're saying, no, in a way that's wrong. They're not merely compatible. Science drives you to believe.
Science, mathematics are inextricably tied to God, like, and first principles. You cannot separate them whatsoever.
In God.
That's right. Let me make it even more provocative, because I can tell that you're quite a provocative guy and I like it. You see, let me put it this way. I think, and I believe there's evidence for the fact that faith in God and science sit very comfortably, as they did in the minds of Galileo, Kepler, and Newton. What doesn't fit together is science and atheism. I think that atheism undermines science for a reason that is connected with the effectiveness of mathematics.
So we should properly be challenging atheists far more than they challenge people of faith.
Well, that's right. And I can unpack that a little bit, if you like, because it is a major argument these days. You see, we have this trust as scientists, as mathematicians, in human reason. We rely on our human reason to get to our conclusions. Now, in the 1940s, C.S. Lewis was writing about this, and I think people didn't really grasp what he was saying. What he was saying is this. He said, any theory of mind that undermines the validity of human reason cannot be true, because you reach that theory by reasoning.
Okay. Again, this is another heavy one. I want to pause.
Yes, it's beautiful.
These are big ideas, but they're very, very important ideas. He phrased it in such a way, Lewis did, at some point, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, if the universe made no sense, or if the universe were absurd, if the universe made no sense, we should never have discovered that. We never would be able to discover that.
That is part of it. That goes down to the root of it. And the reason for it, and he put it brilliantly, but it wasn't in the center of the big debate.
Yeah, a lot of people say like universe is chaos and entropy, but most people don't know there's also like a divine order to things. Like that's the reason why mathematics works. That's the reason why numbers, laws of logic, everything works, because there's like a divine order to things. And it's not just random entropy. There has to be like a strict order things.
Not to the extent it is today, because what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years is that a very prominent atheist is beginning to use Lewis's arguments, and that has changed the balance completely.
And who is that?
It's Thomas Nagel.
In New York City?
In New York City,
NYU.
that's right. That's right. But if you like, I'll backtrack a bit so that we can unpack this so that it makes a kind of sense.
Yeah.
Lewis is suggesting that if you undermine the validity of reason, your theory's wrong. Now, I'm suggesting that that's why Wigner said mathematics is unreasonably effective, because his worldview, which was atheistic, followed to its logical conclusion, actually destroys rational thought.
Yes.
Now, let me put it in the form of a discussion I frequently have. I tease people, my fellow colleagues.
Atheists are so stupid they couldn't even explain consciousness. They couldn't explain rational thinking. Like
They like being teased, you see. And I say to them, tell me what you do science with. And of course, if they're in the physical sciences, they'll tell me about some very expensive piece of equipment. They've got $1 billion. I said, no, I don't mean that. I mean, they say, you mean my, and they're about to say mind when they remember it's not politically correct to say mind. So they say,
I had no idea things have gotten to the point where it's no longer politically correct to say mind.
oh yes, you've got to say brain. The mind is the brain, because everything is physical, you see.
Okay,
Everything can be reduced to
yeah, they, They're never they stay away from terms such as mind. They stay away terms such as like consciousness. They say things like brain because they have this materialistic worldview where and reductionism where they reduce everything to just brain and matter. Like
physics
I
and
was going to say
chemistry.
let's make sure that that's clear to the audience.
Yes.
Because this is an amazing idea. The idea that the mind is not the same as the brain. The idea that if we were only moist robots, as somebody disgustingly put it,
Yeah, computing meat.
computing meat. If that were the case, then in effect, anything like a computer ought to develop consciousness. But nothing that we ever know of, except humans, has consciousness. So the mind.
yeah, human beings are this parts. You cannot use reductionism to constitute fundamental principles of human beings. Like even if you like put every human part together, it still won't be like a alive human being. There has to be something else that animates it. There has to be something else that explains how reasoning works.
Mind is separate from our mere brains, but it has gotten to the point, and I just wanted to annotate that or underscore that you're saying that in the world of science at Oxford, people are afraid to use the word mind because it implies that there's something beyond the physical material brain.
But yes, that's right, but it's not all people. If we step back from this, let's put this in a bigger framework. What we're up against in the culture is the logical conclusion of a materialistic view of the universe. See, let's go back to Socrates and Plato, because that'll help make things clear. In the world of their time, about 300 BC or so, the Greeks were divided in their view of the big question. What is the nature of ultimate reality? Now, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all believed in the gods. They believed there was something more than the physical universe. But Democritus and Leucippus, who were geniuses because they developed the atomic theory. And the atomic theory is one of the most important things ever discovered. Richard Feynman actually made a very interesting statement. He said, if all of science was lost, all of science was lost, but there was one result that we could preserve to pass to the next generation, just one, it would have to be the atomic theory, that everything is made of atoms. Now, atomos means indivisible. We know they're divisible, but the basic idea is there is stuff, very tiny stuff, and everything, but everything is made of that stuff. Now
But I have to say, as proud as I am to be a Greek, the idea that someone in Greece in the 4th century, Democritus, came up with that idea, how in the world, without going into this too much, but how could they back then have come up with this idea?
Well, by a brilliant piece of reasoning. They could take a piece of wood and they could cut it, and it was smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and they reckoned there must be a point at which that process stops by something that couldn't be cut. And this is the basic stuff of reality.
A lot of dudes in ancient Greece were more smarter than, atheistic idiots today. Like, it's kind of crazy if you think about it.
But then they made a leap that this would be all of reality. Now, that view barrels up through the centuries, and it sits in Oxford. It's, in fact, the dominant philosophy in Western.
And it's not just a non sequitur. Like, they were smart enough to understand everything requires a first principles. Like, they were smart enough to understand, like, things require, like, a cause. There has to be a primary cause. And they equated, like, pantheistic gods and shit. Like, but they know there was something beyond just matter, not just physical reality.
Academia, and we call it materialism. Now, there's another version which we call naturalism. They're both atheistic. They both deny anything beyond, but some give a little bit more weight to the existence of mind that's independent of matter. Now, if you are
And a lot of naturalistic explanation doesn't even make sense, like, if you critically think about it.
a materialist, then you're going to say that when everything else is said, mind reduces to brain. That's all it is. Brain reduces to physics and chemistry, and all we are is physics and chemistry. Now, back to my little story, you see. Let's suppose that's true for a minute. And I say to my friends, tell me what you do science with. I do it with my brain. Tell me about your brain. I have great fun with this. Tell me about your brain. What is the brain? Give me the short story. Well, the short story is the brain is the end product of a mindless, unguided process. And I look at them and I smile and I say this, and you trust
Even if you have all this modern study, we still couldn't understand, like, what the fuck actually goes around in the brain. Like, we still couldn't understand.
it. You trust it. Now tell me honestly, and I let this sink in, if you knew that the computer you use in your laboratory or any of the instruments was the end product of a mindless, unguided process, would you trust it? I've never had the answer yes to that. No. And yet, now, I say, there's a problem there. Can you not see? That you are using something that your theories, that is your philosophy, your worldview of what is ultimate reality, is destroying the very thing you want to trust. I regard that as totally inconsistent. Now, from where I sit, Atoms aren't ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is God, who is mind. You've got it exactly the wrong way round. The fundamental stuff of the universe is not mass energy, it's spirit. God is spirit, he's not material. And therefore, I believe mathematics is very reasonably effective, because mathematics being a product of the
Yeah, every ancient philosophers, everyone recognized the spirit, soul itself. Like only in the New Age, naturalistic reductionist, atheistic philosophy, which doesn't even fucking work in their own model. Like a lot of things are just presuppositions and assumptions. Like it doesn't even work. Like
human mind is a reflection of the God in whose image we are made. And that is why science rocketed up in the 16th century, because that's exactly what Newton and company believed.
yeah, let's talk about mathematics in general. Like a lot of things like the fractals and like the Mandelbrot set. Like we're getting into the Mandelbrot set, like Fibonacci sequence. Like it's a lot of mathematical sequences that let's explain the infinite nature of God. Like let's get into the Mandelbrot set, bro. This is crazy. This is a video by Redeem Zomer. Like encourage you to subscribe.
To believe in God because we have science to explain everything in the universe. It's true that science is able to explain the natural world, that's what it's for, but by definition science cannot tell us whether there's anything outside or above the natural world, in other words, whether there's anything supernatural. Generally, when people speak of God, they mean a supernatural, all-knowing mind who is everywhere and can do anything. So what is math, and what does it have to do with God? Math is about numbers, and information about those numbers, and ways numbers connect to each other, but where do we find all this math? We can't see math, we can't touch math, we can't taste math. Math is only in the mind. We find it simply by thinking about it and figuring more and more things out. But wait, math also explains things. Math can explain everything, from simple counting to the movement of planets. For anything you can think of, there's a bunch of math that explains what's going on, even down to the atomic level. So, if math is only in our minds, but it also explains the natural world, then where does it come from? There's two possibilities, really. One is that math is just something we invented to explain what we observe in the natural world, and that would mean the origin of math is natural. But the other possibility is that math is already there because it controls the universe, and
Yeah, 100%. Nothing's naturalistic. We discover mathematics.
we've discovered it, and if that's true, then the origin of math is supernatural. Here's why the latter option is correct. Math contains infinite information. There's an infinite number of numbers, each with their own individual properties, and there's an infinite number of numbers in between any two numbers. And we keep discovering things. Pi, which is the number that explains the area of a circle, has an infinite number of digits that we keep discovering by doing calculations. If we were just making this stuff up, we could make pi be whatever we want it to be, but we can't do that because we know that that's not true. We know that all this information is out there somewhere, but it can't be in our physical universe because our universe is finite and math is infinite. That means math contains every possible combination of numbers, and if we use numbers as code for letters, then math contains every possible combination of letters as well. That means every book that has ever been written already exists encoded in math somewhere. In fact, every book that possibly could be written already exists in math. And if we use numbers as code for particles and their locations, then you could say there's an exact copy of our universe encoded in math. But there's also more stuff in math, so that's why math can't possibly be contained just within our universe. But that's just the beginning. There's many pieces of evidence in math to show that math has a designer. Here's an example. One time someone discovered that this simple equation makes a very interesting shape when you graph it in the complex plane, and this is called the Mandelbrot set. But people have analyzed this shape and have found some very scary things about it.
You know, Mandelbrot set is also known as the fingerprint of God itself. That's what they call it.
What's amazing about the Mandelbrot set is that you can zoom in infinitely and you'll keep finding new things. Over here you can keep finding more and more copies of the Mandelbrot set no matter how far you zoom in. You could even zoom in really close to
Bro, this is crazy. This is the infinite nature of God itself.
something like this, and it takes a while, but look, there's another little baby Mandelbrot set. Alternatively, you could go into this region and find completely different things. On the left side of this thing, you'll find these weird elephant-shaped things that have spirals that go on forever, and you could even zoom into the side of one of the spirals and find new spirals that repeat infinitely and keep generating new infinite patterns like this. Or you could go on the other side of the elephants and find these weird seahorse-shaped things that have different kinds of spirals that are connected to each other, and once again, they keep going on forever. You can zoom in infinitely, and you'll keep finding new patterns, but like I said, it's a different type of pattern. Seriously, anytime you explore the Mandelbrot set, you can find brand new things.
And not just Mandelbrot, so there are different fractals also. Like, if you went to the fractal rabbit hole studying Mandelbrot set, your mind will be blown.
Possibly things that no human has ever seen before, because like I said, there is infinite complexity and infinite information in this one shape. That's why this little shape is so scary. We did not invent this because we discovered it by accident, but we did not discover it in our universe. It has infinite complexity, so it can't possibly be in our universe because the universe doesn't have infinites. We discovered it just by calculating it. So where the heck did this thing come from?
Yeah, it's so rightfully called God's fingerprint because it's infinite nature and it goes on.
Basic common sense says that someone designed this, but no human designed it. Like we said, math only exists in the mind, so its origin must also be a mind. Math contains infinite information, so this mind must be all-knowing. Math controls the universe, so this mind must also be all-powerful. And math is beyond and outside of our natural world, so this mind must be supernatural. And we have just described God. All these numbers and mathematical facts exist in the infinite mind of God, but it's not just mathematical truth that exists in the mind of God, but also moral truth and any kind of truth at all. Goodness, truth, and beauty are just mere opinions
100%.
of the human mind, unless there is a supreme mind, God, who overrules all human opinions.
Yes, without a moral theistic God, you cannot give any kind of justification for morality and ethics itself.
Because math is beyond time, space, and limits, the existence of math proves the existence of God because math is in the mind of God. As the great scientist Galileo said, math is the language with which God has written the universe.
Yeah, that's bars. Like, so that's about it, bro. Like and subscribe.